Modifiers are a whole bunch of different type of actions that can be applied to objects. Now in this scene, I've made 4 different objects: a sphere, a cylinder, a box, and a box. I'm going to go ahead and put this on edged faces. You can see the 2 boxes are slightly different. Other than that, all of these have a lot of segments in them. And we're going to talk about how segments tie into the modifiers as well. Real quick, because I made this file in Max 8, but you can make your own file to test this with. The sphere is located right here, and you just drag it out and make a sphere. Cylinder is located right here. When you drag out the cylinder, make sure it has a lot of segments and sides in it. Right there. Your box is located right here. Drag it out and just make sure that it has one box with a lot of segments. This one has a few segments in it. And another box with a whole lot of segments in it. So this one just has a few. We can ramp these segments up right over here to make a lot. So you should know how to make a box by now. That was covered in an earlier tutorial. Or at least make all these primitives. The type of primitive you make really doesn't matter. These are just kind of test versions for us to play with. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight this tall box here and just isolate that selection so that I can work just on that. Your modifiers are located under Modify, this tab right here. We can keep the box right where it is. We don't need to change it to an edit poly. And this modifier list, if I click this, you'll see here's all the different things we can do. Now, not all of these will do anything to a box. Some will, some won't. And I'm going to go to the obvious ones first in this, and we'll go from there. Bend is a real good one to start with, so we'll start with that. Now, before we go any farther, you'll notice this is called your stack, and it's a lot like Photoshop layers in that the box now has a bend modifier applied to it, and the bend modifier is above the box and thus affecting the box. Bend, in this case, this guy, and I can click on it to highlight it. That means it's active. Comes with a few little things we can do to it, like the angle we can bend it to. We can bend it all the way down on the ground. We can bend it a little bit and then change the axis that we're bending it on if we want to. You can see that I could change it to this axis, and when I bend it, the modifier is being applied to a different axis. I'll turn it back to Z. We can also change the direction that it modifies it on. And I can rotate this around in case I wanted it to bend on a slightly different axis. Like, let's say we wanted it to bend at a 45-degree axis, and then I could bend the angle down right to about there, and I end up with something that's bending on a 45-degree axis, or thereabouts, as opposed to straight. So these modifiers all come with different settings. This one also comes with an upper limit and a lower limit. Also, modifiers will always, well, most of them, will have this little plus by them. And the little plus, when you drop it down, tends to have the really good stuff located in there. You can see Gizmo is one of them that comes in. They all have different settings. The Gizmo is this yellow cage that's around it, and if I move the gizmo, see how it changes the way that it bends. I can raise this up and it bends through the gizmo. So the gizmo is kind of like the control that's causing it to bend. If I rotate the gizmo, you can see that I can twist and turn this box all over just by rotating the gizmo. So don't forget that the gizmo is the real control behind these modifiers. Center, in this case, is just where the center of the bend is. So if the center is over here, it's going to bend over on itself, and if I move the center way over here, then I can make this an arch. Hit zoom extents all. If I move the center way over here into the center, you'll see that it's an arch. Now, I can, in this case, maybe I don't have enough segments here to accommodate the bend. That's the benefit of modifiers being on top of the stack, is I can go back down to, turn center off, I can go back down to box, and as long as this little button here, which is called show end result, is clicked, I'll turn it off and you'll see my box goes back to box because I'm at box level. I go up to bend, it applies to bend. But when I go back down, it goes back to box. This button is the show end result button, and it allows you to see everything in your stack applied. And I can change the segments in my box, if I can find the right segments, there we go. I can change the segments to be 3 segments or more segments and adapt this to whatever I want. So in my case, with this bend applied to it, I don't need all these other segments. They're just wasting polygons. See? No change. They're just wasting polygons, but I can add more height segments in this case to create a different effect. And then if I go back up to bend, everything will still allow me to maneuver those different drop downs around if I want to. So the things to remember are, remember to check the little plus to see what's hidden under there. And some of the modifiers can get really complicated. Let's do another one. I'm going to get out of isolation mode here. I'm going to select bend and I'm going to trash it. And then back under my box, I'm going to once again go back and add a whole bunch of segments here into that box. I'm going to click the cylinder this time and isolate the cylinder, and we'll zoom into it using zoom extents all. Shove that guy up there. And this time I'm going to add a, let's see, which one do we want to do? Let's do the lattice. I'm going to apply lattice to this, and you'll see it makes this huge mess of kind of pieces, and we don't really know what it's done right now. Let's kind of explore what we get here with lattice. Lattice is making where all of the edges have now become structures, and it makes like a cage. And I can see it better if I turn on struts only from edges. And you can see that it's kind of made this, looks like a skyscraper there. And you can kind of see there's parts and pieces. Again, let's play with our stack over here and go back down to the cylinder. Make sure show end result is turned on or it won't work. And I'm going to knock the height segments down a little bit and the sides down a little bit, and you can see better what lattice does. Go back up to lattice. The radius controls how thick those pieces are. They can be very thin. If I render this, your quick render button is right up here if you'd like to render it. That's what it looks like. We can change, what do we want to do here? Let's see. We can make them smooth, and so if we make them bigger, you'll see they're kind of square shaped there. I can add more sides to it, and now when I render it, they're round. Lattice works great for making grills and pieces of the tank that'll be kind of like wire or rebar type stuff if you want to do that. But lattice is a good one. The other one in lattice here, if you go to joints, it makes these little ball pieces. You can turn on both. I'm going to turn down the radius so you can see it. Turn on both. And then under joints, we're going to make the radius smaller. And we'll give it more segments. And now I end up with those little spheres where the joints are. Lattice works great for making rows of bolts. If you want to do that, it's also really good for making the structure of things. I'll show you one trick with lattice and then we'll move on to another modifier. I'm going to take lattice off of my cylinder, and what I'm going to do is right click on the cylinder and say clone, make it a copy. So now there's actually two cylinders there. I want them to be right on top of each other. One of them, doesn't matter which, I'm going to apply lattice to. I'm going to say struts only from the edges. I'm going to knock the radius down a little bit, give it a few more sides so it's round. And then when I render this, you can see that I end up with something that looks like it has a lot of structure to it, which is a really good thing for our tanks. And you'll see that I use this a lot, and most students use it a lot. When they make the tank body, they make a clone of the tank body and apply lattice to it, and then you'll have two structures. Now ideally, this isn't something we would import into a video game. We'd probably do this more with texture, but if you want to do it on your tank, it's fine for now, and it's a fun thing to do so that you can get used to modifiers. Okay, exit isolation mode here. I'm going to go to my sphere for the next one, and I'm going to isolate that. Go to Zoom Extents All. And we're going to apply one more modifier here. Let's apply I want a melt modifier, this guy right here. Melt is a fun one in that if we apply melt to our sphere, you'll see our little poor sphere will then melt into a pile of goo. And we can model with it. So if you need a teardrop shape, for instance, or a Hershey Kiss shape, you can basically design it using melt. The spread is the bottom piece here. It also has these little presets so you can melt like glass, jelly, plastic. Glass makes real good kind of pointy shaped things if you want that. Makes real good little studs if you want to use that. You can change the axis if you would like. I like it this way. And these are all animatable as well. You can see the gizmo is located there. Remember to always hit that little button. Here's the gizmo. So it's moving that floor piece or bottom piece up through the object. And you can see you can get some really interesting shapes that maybe you want to use on your tank doing that. The center is the same thing, and we can kind of rotate this through our melt if we would want to do that. So what you'll want to do is play with the different modifiers and apply them to different objects. It's pretty safe to go through here and just try them. If they don't sound like they do something, then they may not do anything to the object you're doing. And since we're just beginning, I'll point out some of the really good ones. There's bend. Whoops, I didn't mean to click on it. Just put my cursor on. Bend. As we go down here, we've got the FFDs, which we'll focus on more later, but those are really good ones to use. Lattice, which we've used. Melt. All the way up here. So melt is a good one to use. Noise is a good one to play with when you begin. Going down here, ripple is a good one to play with. Shell is a good one to play with to see what that does. Smooth will make your objects look a little bit smoother. Spherify, squeeze, stretch. Symmetry, which we'll be playing with a lot here in just a little bit. Taper is a good one. Twist is an obvious one, and that should keep you busy. Those are the beginner level ones if you want to play with those. Okay? So that's the beginning level of modifiers. We're going to play with those a little bit more here in a little bit, and some of those are are integrated into making the tank itself. So you're going to see a lot of those here as we move into weeks 3, 4, and 5.